Some of the earlier characters that that had been played around with, some of them again just didn't feel right for the time period. Some of them either felt overdressed or felt too fantasy. A lot of the concepts too got very detailed. There were lots of flowing things, and there was lots of hair, and there was lots of things that if we had to just model it, it probably would have been a little bit tougher to pull it off. There was one character I remember when I first saw it that had kind of almost kind of a tribal feel to it, a very kind of African feel to it, which I thought was pretty cool. Didn't say Greek, but at the same time when I looked at that, I thought, you know, that would be a pretty cool character to work with.
We went through images of the lone wolf kind of characters where you might have a hero with a little baby or a dog on his back. So just to kind of give something different, you know, about the character and something that you can kind of relate to.
One of the original concepts behind the hero for God of War was to come up with a guy who was, his whole face was encased in a mask. And we thought that going with a mask would be, you know, being able to paint his face in broader strokes so that when you were playing the game, he still had a lot of personality and you could still sort of read that when you saw the mask. But when we actually got it in the game, it ended up feeling very soulless and it didn't feel like the guy had a personality.
That was always one of the big elements that we were dealing with. You know, and it was difficult because, you know, we would often hear, "It's not Greek enough," and we're like, "What does that mean?" I'm using a actual, you know, sometimes because we'd take it right from a Greek, some Greek sources, you know, and it's very Greek. But I think what we really started seeing was, okay, no, it's not. It's not Greek enough according to what the general public knows, and that's kind of what we had to go towards.
These are again very traditional. Some of these were very traditional kind of Greek images, and again, the more traditional it got, the more armor we put on him, the more he lost his individualism.
Every time we put something on, you know, Dave felt like, oh, he doesn't look brutal anymore, and we started realizing brutal also kind of related to the primal part of him, you know, and so we did spend a lot of time going through that, but in the end we ended up still taking his clothes off, and that's what we went with. So
when I first saw this from Charlie, it was the first time that I really saw the brutal nature and the violent nature and the sort of the animalistic quality that would really become the foundation for Kratos. And I think starting to see these images was just like sort of confirmation that this idea could really work, and instead of giving him a traditional sword, going with these sort of chain blades was going to be much more dynamic and fluid and really fun to play with. The main goal for the character in the game was always to create someone that looked really brutal and really nasty and really violent. Instead of sort of going down the traditional route of a iconic Greek hero with the plume helmet and the skirt and the toga and the sandals, we wanted someone who really made the player feel like he was being able to unleash his dark side. So the idea was always, how can we make him look more brutal? How can we make him look more violent and impulsive and nasty? And that desire always superseded sort of historical accuracy. So while you look at this guy and he may not totally feel at home in ancient Greece from a costume standpoint, I think he achieves the greater purpose, which is to give players a character that they can play who really does let them just go nuts and unleash the nasty fantasies they have in their head.
So the idea on the environments and trying to create a Greek world was trying to create a feeling that reminded you of Greece and that didn't feel too fantasy. So we were trying to walk that fine line between a fantasy game environment and a traditional Greek environment. And so part of it was again trying to get stuff that made it feel Greek, not Roman, but Greek.
Okay, when we first start concepting out environments, it wasn't really defined as levels, you know. We picked out the important locations such as Pandora and Athens and Hades, and all I knew is like the game should feel really big, which means there's no like cramped area. It's more like challenge against the god and like huge monsters. So the look of the environment should be like huge, you know.
So with each of the environments, what we tried to do was kind of move you through the world using color to kind of help move Dave's story along and kind of emphasize the emotional impact of what he was of the story he was trying to tell. But at the same time, if I've just come out of the ocean where I'm battling the Hydra, where we've got, in that case, you know, there's more kind of greens and blues and things like that. I don't want to go into that same scenario color-wise again. It's like if I did the whole game in black and white, you get probably bored with it after a while. So one of the interesting aspects, especially in the Pandora section, was a lot of times you'll see multiple iterations on statues as well. And one of the reasons was that one of David's idea was he wanted those statues to come to life, whether it was Atlas or Poseidon rising out of the water. The things that were in that environment, the objects, the architecture, those types of things reflect what was going on, again, with David's story. So in Pandora, as an example, that whole sequence is about an architect who, in David's mind, is basically gone mad. And so the idea was the structures, the traps, the visual look of that should begin to reflect kind of a madman in some instance.
I did that piece, even the level of the design wasn't solid yet. So, but my own interpretation, I was thinking it's like things are like there's no gravity, but at the same time things are like kind of shifting all the time, and there's infinite distance in the back. Things are flying, falling, exploding. The Mountain Olympus, that one particularly, it's not for the game art. It's more like, okay, we want to talk about Mountain Olympus, so where's the image? That kind of thing.
The goal of the world of God of War was really to create a place that felt like, you know, a giant theme park ride, you know, or a giant set on one of these great high adventure movies, and places that you'd really want to explore and spend time in and really feel like you were having this grand adventure. And I think these guys, you know, week after week continually were able to come up with set pieces and ideas that they just top themselves constantly and continually, and they've really given us this great world to play in, and I think they did an amazing job, and I'm so grateful as a player that I get to actually play in this space.
When it came to the characters and monsters and creatures that our hero is going to encounter, we're dealing with characters and creatures that everybody is familiar with. Medusas, Cyclops, centaurs, minotaurs. One of the things that we had to do with all the characters, and I think you'll see this as you look through the concept art, one of the things that was very important to me was that when somebody looked at any of our characters, that they knew what they were. So what we could do basically there, as long as the character was down on all fours and I had 3 heads, you probably would accept that character as a Cerberus. Whether it was a werewolf, whether it was a dinosaur, you know, again, you would still accept that in our world and what we were doing in terms of building the mythology we were building, you would accept that.
As far as a game creature is concerned, mostly what was fascinating me was the deep sea creatures and how freaky they looked. And I was trying to pull up on some of that, and did a number of different types of hydras.
I was told, okay, Ares would be maybe 90% elemental, 5 or 10% human. And so that's kind of what I was going for on these beginning ones. He's just pure power, almost like he's this unstoppable force. And then, Dave liked it. It's just he wasn't sure how we would do it. Probably was a slow transition towards being more human. So it's still kind of a huge guy, but he's got all this armor on that allows him to do all these things.
So the idea was, again, to move a character into something that, again, would be a little bit more in the horror direction. And again, what it allowed us to do was get characters that were still reminiscent of what they were supposed to be in Greek mythology, but were uniquely ours. So once we started moving in that direction, again, it opened up a whole new kind of avenue of ways to explore those characters. What we really wanted to do was keep people immersed in the mythology, in the Greek mythology, but give them a different kind of experience when it came to the characters and the creatures.